Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual, as always, by Mr. Tucker Hazel, my splat-loving co-host and compatriot, and we're here to talk about the new Splatoon
You
game.
really enunciated that. I mean, that just took way longer than it should have.
Well,
Like, if when I'm listening back to this at 2 times speed, it'll sound normal, but just then it did not.
Well, that's actually an interesting strategy, right? Because I'm a 1 time speed enjoyer of videos, but you're a 2 time speed enjoyer. And I would say that I have a fundamental moral objection to 2 time speed.
Yeah.
If I started to talk like this in all of the videos, it would really, really mess up your ability to watch them in 2 times speed.
No, but
You'd have to go to 4 times speed. And Tucker, speaking of the number 4, what we are not getting from EPD 5 next is Splatoon 4. Instead, we are getting Splatoon Raiders, a very intriguing game which we know very little about. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what we're interested in about this game, but I also want to situate it sort of in the wider context of how it was announced on Nintendo today. Where it sits in what we can probably imagine is the next 6 to maybe 9 months of Switch 2, and sort of what it represents for Splatoon as a series, because Splatoon is interesting in that it is a series that is a lot more iterative than many of Nintendo's series, and it's actually come under a lot of ire for that fact. And now to pivot away from the, I think, expected being Splatoon 4 out of the Splatoon side of EPD 5, I think gives us a lot of interesting, conversation, food for conversation here as we look at what is considered by Nintendo quite clear to be one of its major marquee IP. And also, interestingly, this is the 10-year anniversary of Splatoon, so it's a cool moment for it to be going in a different direction here a little bit. Not exactly to the day. It was end of May 2015 that Splatoon 1 came out. But Tucker, obviously, let's start from the highest level fact about this game that they really drill into your head in the rather brief trailer. And that's the fact that this is specifically by name a Splatoon spin-off. There's a whole inner title card to that fact. And obviously, we have disagreed in the past about whether there would ever even be a Splatoon spin-off. And obviously, you were indeed correct in thinking that there would be, because in fact now there is. So what are you thinking about, not only about the game, but sort of where you stand as a man, as sort of an intellectual and a pundit?
Well, where I stand is what I like to call the right place. And it's something where it seems like no one else is here. What the hell? Where's everyone else? Especially not you, which you should really be on your hands and knees, like bowing to me, kissing my feet, like offering me tithes and things of that nature. Because to be honest, this is, for me, been like one of our iconic disagreements of specifically the Splatoon franchise and whether or not it had either the interest from the developers or the flexibility within the IP to have something outside of core installments, which especially within the stable of Nintendo is much more similar to the iteration of other shooter series and live service series. Things like Battlefield or Call of Duty. Splatoon is Nintendo's analog to that, of course, different in certain ways, but through its relative sameness within its entries, through its commitment to live service and updates, and especially within Splatoon 3, Battle Pass, things like that, and also having the flexibility because it is a multiplayer game to offer different modes. Your argument always was that any spin-off would just be included within a larger package as the differentiator for whatever that next entry would be. And that was also a very strong argument. We'd seen things like the DLC for the previous games, or Salmon Run, or Table Turf, or these other things that are different game modes and played differently enough to maybe have been considered, maybe at one point, their own downloadable side game. I mean, I would buy a Splatoon : Salmon Run, that came out in 2018 or whatever, or a $5 Table Turf Battle, download it on my Switch, play it once and never play it again. Like that definitely could have made sense in another world, but it wasn't what we were getting. And so, and we were getting things like the Side Order, which was a roguelike mode. I was like, okay, that could have been its own thing as well, but they are always kind of glomming things onto Splatoon. And now we have Raiders, which is in the trailer, as you mentioned, a spin-off games being sold separately. Unclear what the scope of this project is, but clearly in some differentiating way that we're not exactly sure what it is yet, it is different enough from what we understand Splatoon to be up to this point to where, and is also substantial enough to where it needs to be its own project that has its own appeal. And I find that fascinating and for me incredibly exciting because while Splatoon 2 and 3 are two of my favorite games of all time, I'm looking forward to a Splatoon 4 in terms of just being able to check in on the series again and because I like it a lot. But this Splatoon Raiders is more exciting to me as a prospect than a Splatoon 4 would be.
Yeah,
because there's so much more potential.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's just like so many different ways I want to take you and also this conversation. I think that something that's really interesting to me is the name, and not specifically Raiders, but I think about the recent asset developer interview from Nintendo about Mario Kart World, and in there there's an exchange where the heads of EPD9 are talking about the fact that if Mario Kart World had simply been more Mario Kart as we understand it, it would have been called Mario Kart 9, but because they wanted to come in and overhaul a lot of fundamental aspects of Mario Kart, they felt like a subtitle was more appropriate than a numeral.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, while Nintendo looks like a monolith all the times, it has very discrete internal teams, and EPD5 is not EPD9. But part of what I had been thinking about, because I've been playing actually a lot of Splatoon 3, sort of waiting for Switch 2 to come out, just a happy coincidence, because we now have this patch for Switch 2, and I want to actually come back to that. But I was thinking, I would really love for the next Splatoon game to be Splatoon 4 in the way that Mario Kart World is Mario Kart 9, but be this new look for the series, have some fundamentally new ideas. And you cited a lot of really good examples of things that I think could have been spin-offs in Splatoon's past. Side Order to me is the clearest example because not only was Nintendo's 2024 somewhat light, but also, and I love Side Order for the record, but Side Order exists like in a completely different context for all intents and purposes than the rest of the game. I think the prompt to get you there is you click a button that says like imagine. I think it's called Alterna, if I remember. Yeah. And like you end up in this like place that looks completely different. Obviously the structure of that is completely different. And I was just thinking to myself, man, the fact that this is not a $29.99 or $24.99 digital only title.
$26.99 maybe.
Yeah, $27.99.
25.52. I don't know. I'm gonna get saucy with it.
I saw it. I was at a gas station today, and they were selling a pack of cigarettes for $13.62, and I thought that was very strange.
I agree with you.
But the larger point is
because I don't understand why someone would sell cigarettes. It's bad for you.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. But the larger point for me is that, as you're saying, clearly there is something here that in this slight trailer we don't learn about, but makes it worthwhile of separating out. But to me, it also puts Splatoon 4, when that game inevitably comes around, in a somewhat odd position, because I think part of what made 3 special by the time we had everything in, or what made 2 special via Salmon Run, is that there are these other new types of play in the main Splatoon game that made it feel more fresh, pardon the pun. And so I was watching the trailer for Raiders, and I was thinking to myself, man, so why isn't this just the single player component or the basis of a PvE, some kind of PvE experience in Splatoon 4? And the other thing, and this is an interesting thing I've been considering, why wasn't this a quote unquote plus game, to take Nintendo Forecast terminology?
3 plus Raiders,
to take Nintendo Forecast terminology for it, because we are getting a free update for Splatoon 3. As of when you're watching this, either tomorrow or it might be available right now, which makes the game look better and run better in certain key areas. And that's a free update, when I think the expectation from me, at least based on what Nintendo has been setting forth with like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, is that you're going to pay for this stuff.
Yeah.
But what we have here is a free update to Splatoon 3 and then a totally discrete spin-off game.
Yeah.
And I'm really just curious about the flexibility Nintendo is illustrating and how they're releasing games, and also really what this means in a broader sense for Splatoon 4. Are we looking at a situation where the really interesting stuff, to your point, is this spin-off where there's no rules, and then we get the core entry, which is in some way more iterative, more familiar, more safe? And I wonder if that's a good thing, or maybe I'm thinking about too far into the future.
Well, I think when you posit it as experimentation versus safety, I think that line's a little bit blurrier in my opinion, because what I think is exciting about Raiders happening is not only that I'm right, that's the main thing, but
of course,
and that it means that the game will be coming sooner. I'm of the opinion that it's probably coming this year. Though if it was, I feel like maybe we would have said that, but it was on the Nintendo Today app, so I don't really know. So if there's a direct, would that be in there? And we didn't really see gameplay. There's a lot of question marks on that. But I do think it's coming sooner, and especially think it's coming sooner than a Splatoon 4 would have if that was the next big project. And I think that it gives Splatoon 4 more time to then not only just cook, because we've got a new Splatoon game on the shelf that kind of resets the clock a little bit. Splatoon 3 is now getting actually not only just those updates, but also for quality, but also new maps and new guns, which they said that they were going to stop a little bit a while ago, and had stopped for a while, and so now that's maybe going to become a thing where Splatoon 3 gets a second wave of support, which would mean that you don't have to put out a 4 for a while. So that game is relevant now, but also in the way that I see Splatoon Raiders in a similar camp as something like Mario Maker, to where you give the team a little bit of something different to do. It revitalizes their creative juices, and then will infuse that back into Splatoon 4, which I'm sure is being worked on right now.
Yeah.
But just having that team have a side project that they can experiment with different elements of, I wouldn't be surprised if the map design or some of the abilities that the characters have in Splatoon 4, or the single player adventure, if there is one in Splatoon 4, are heavily informed by what they learned by making Raiders, which, for the record, and basically based on only the couple seconds of gameplay and screenshots that we have, I think is something like a survival game where you go out onto these islands, explore, collect resources, come back and build up your ship in order to escape or whatever. Because the narrative thrust is that your character, a mechanic, and deep cut.
That was Freudian slip.
The narrative thrust is that Deep Cut has been stranded on some sort of island, and they have like a ramshackle jalopy ass boat that they're living on, and so that is, I see that as a substantial, primarily single player survival adventure game set in the Splatoon universe, which, when you phrase it like that and you talk about the way that this is structured differently, it feels like something different. Of course, it could have easily been the single player component of another Splatoon game, but I'm really fascinated by this. I'm also just, again, then fascinated to see how then it informs the design of Splatoon 4, with this being a interesting new side project for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the Octo expansion, a lot of the ideas from that are very clearly transposed into and expanded upon in the base campaign of Splatoon 3.
Yeah, definitely.
And so there's no doubt that whatever Raiders does, in my view, is going to in some way inform what happens next in the core of the series. I really like what you're putting forth in terms of what the game could be. I feel like, for me personally, there's just so little information. I don't even really know where to begin with the speculation on it. But where I land on it on a personal level is that you stand in the right and I stand corrected, and I'm happy to,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think that something that goes under the radar, in my view, is that
Is how humble you are.
well, no, I make a point of reiterating that is that I think that
I'm the most humble guy ever.
Splatoon 2's campaign and Octo expansion to a lesser degree, but especially Splatoon 3's campaign and side order are among the best single player
yeah.
offerings of the
That you
Switch
do say
era.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that goes a little bit under the radar. And obviously, in our review of Splatoon 3, we're extremely laudatory of that campaign because it truly is. It's grand and it's fun and it's very creative, and so
It's
the idea
fresh.
it's fresh. The idea that EPD5 would, the Splatoon team would be saying, okay, well, we really want to theoretically double down on single player, and as we see in things like Side Order, or we see in things like Salmon Run, this is a team that is very aware of trends and genre
Oh,
types.
sure. Yeah, good point.
And so I think that the idea
We got our zombies mode and our roguelike mode
Yeah.
within Splatoon.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that as you're saying, having a key touchstone, be it the survival genre or be it whatever it ends up being, right?
Yeah.
My personal theory is that I could see this game leaning a lot more heavily into PvE multiplayer, if there is multiplayer.
Yeah, I think co-op is very possible.
Yeah.
But I'm be interested to see if multiplayer, specifically like multiplayer modes outside of optional co-op, are a big part of it, because I personally lean towards no, because I think then at that point, like, it's just Splatoon 4.
Yeah, and I mean this is
I think specifically no turf war in this at all.
Oh, I would agree with that completely.
No clam blitz, no salmon run, unless it's like a spin on salmon run where like the night times have like hordes of enemies coming at you or something like that.
Yeah, when I say PvE, I more mean something that interlocks quite closely actually with kind of what you're proposing, where you can go with friends onto these islands, and obviously they've been building this quite fun to fight against enemy AI.
Oh yeah,
in the salmon
and enemy design.
Exactly.
The salmonid bosses are some of the most fun designs and gameplay and visually that Nintendo has in terms of bosses to fight.
Yeah, like, totally.
Because most fucking bosses in Nintendo games are like bop it on the weak spot 4 times.
Yeah.
But you got that guy that's got like a stack of pots. I love that guy.
Absolutely.
I love the guy that's like the little flappy one that then like turns into a bunker on the ground and like peeks out of it.
Or the one that jumps out of the ink and you have to roll a bomb into his mouth, so he jumps out and grabs the bomb instead of you. Like that.
You gotta chuck it, like you gotta like buckets, like get the thing in there. Oh,
yes,
man.
yeah. It's all great stuff, and so I just think that again, if we think about Splatoon as a series that iterates and sort of aggregates its past ideas into new forms and new projects, I could really see a lot of the spirit of Salmon Run and the underlying ideas of Salmon Run end up in this game. But I'm also just curious how this fits into the wider plan for that team, because EPD5 is a team we've been talking about amongst our friends and online as one of the Nintendo teams that is ready, right, for the early Switch generation.
Yeah.
Both sides of it.
It's the longest gap they've ever had between releases right now.
Yeah,
not counting Side Order.
The Splatoon, sure. Look at EPD5 as a whole. Yeah. With the Splatoon side and the Animal Crossing side, what I'm really interested about is exactly what the division of labor on the Splatoon side of things is. Because again, shout out Nintendo Forecast, did a really interesting deep dive into the credits when Splatoon 3 came out and saw that we're very clearly diverging the sides of EPD5 to where they can kind of have both projects, an Animal Crossing project, a Splatoon project, and moving very concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm curious about is there now another fork where the Splatoon side of the team has a smaller group that is
forecast.
There we go. That is working on these spin-off style projects, and then who's working on the main game. And I think we were talking with Bo or someone, and the Splatoon 1 director was missing for a while, and I think is working on that Connex game.
Sure.
If I remember correctly, there's a little bit of fact checking. This is sort of off the cuff discussion here, but and please let us know in the comments if the credits of Side Order in particular reveal that there's clearly a quote-unquote A side and a B side to the Splatoon half of EPD5. But if you think about Splatoon 2 coming out 2 years after Splatoon 1, I wonder if there's a world where this is largely what the Splatoon side of EPD5 is working on. The game is going to come out imminently, and then in 2 years, 2.5 years, Splatoon 4 comes out.
Yeah.
Or if this is going to be a
I
bit
think
of
that's probably true.
That tends to be my feeling.
Yeah.
Especially if Splatoon 3 is somewhat unexpectedly and against their own word being refreshed with new updates and content. Slight updates, to be clear.
They could have released it as Splatoon 3 refresh and charged $80 for it.
I mean, like the
Splatoon 3 refresh, the Splatoon 3 refresh plus Splatoon Raiders game for Nintendo Switch 2.
Exactly. And like the new map is Urchin Underpass coming back. So it's not this is not a...
And the new gun is we recolored it and gave you the fucking shitty bomb or whatever. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's not as substantial as, those early updates to Splatoon 3. Yeah. Just the point being, I think it'd be interesting to see how this impacts EPD5, especially when the Splatoon side of that team is so prolific. Especially you start adding in the expansions they've been doing in the Switch era, and you've got releases from Splatoon in 2017, 2018, uncharacteristically long gap till 2022, and then 2024 with Side Order, and then presumably 2025 with Raiders. Because I agree with you. I think that this game is coming out soon.
Yeah, my main argument for that in my head is that we've seen Nintendo over the last few years be very quick with major releases in terms from announcement to release. It's funny, actually, the major games have been the ones that gotten less time in terms of marketing cycle. I mean, the longest gap between reveal and release that we've had in the last 2 years has been Donkey Kong, which for whatever reason was announced in the summer and didn't release until the next year.
Yeah.
And then, but then, Echoes of Wisdom and Mario Wonder and WarioWare Move It and like all these games
Dread.
had
Metroid
Dread, have had really tight 4, 5, 6 month reveal cycles or less, and so I feel like Splatoon fits more into that. And then of course it's the smaller tier where it's like, okay, screw you, you're getting Rhythm Heaven Groove in like December 2026. What the fuck? Give us the game. You should have put this one out today. Can you imagine though if Rhythm Heaven Groove had trial dropped? Not only would that have made sense because it's a smaller game, but also because they didn't have any games for like a fucking 5-month period because fuck you.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're a Switch 1 only player still at this point, obviously this new update to Splatoon 3 is cool, but you've not had a new game since Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and presumably Prime 4 is maybe launching. My headcanon is in that September window, probably. So that's a long gap. It's very strange, and I think this actually, Tucker, brings us to kind of the last point that I think is worth discussing here, which is just the mode of announcement for this game.
Yeah.
Because the game was announced in what was effectively a Splatoon Direct, because it was the announcement of Raiders, it was the announcement of the 10.0 update, the announcement of the Switch 2 version, Switch 2 patch, I should say, for Splatoon 3. In this, like, it was called like Update from the Squid Research Lab video, which debuted first on Nintendo today. Now, there wasn't as much of a lead time as I thought there might be, or I guess kind of expected there to be. I don't actually know exactly when it launched. It was somewhere in the hour of 8 a.m. EST, because I got a message from my friend Chris being like, they're just announcing whole games on Nintendo today now, huh? And then obviously that kind of got me being like, whoa, what are you talking about? And then at 9 a.m. the trailer released on YouTube. But there's a window of exclusivity, quote unquote, of the announcement for like half an hour to Nintendo today. And beyond that point, it was, again, a complete shadow drop in a period where it's unclear what the Nintendo Direct situation is in the short to medium term. I found it to be a very strange way to go about showcasing this game.
I thought it was weird. the lack of information there's a lot of information. There's way more information in this 7-minute video dropped on Nintendo Today than I expected there to be, but there's also a lot less than maybe there should have been. Because again, really ostensibly no gameplay for this, definitely no release date or even window for it. This would have made sense as a center chunk in a Nintendo Direct. And a Nintendo Direct that, frankly, right now we sorely need in terms of they've announced a lot of games. Multiple of them haven't gotten any gameplay, and most of them don't have any dates. And so this gives me some worry that the fact that we had this much information on it gives me some worry that we won't get a Direct and that things will just be piecemeal. You wake up on Thursday morning and Dragon Dive has a release date and a little bit of a deep dive. I think that's actually very possible.
Yeah, I do.
But I also think the fact that there wasn't that much information in this makes me feel like maybe there's a Direct that then has a full gameplay trailer and release date for this fucking game. Like, it's so mishmashy and like kind of half-assed in a way, and especially weird because Nintendo announces Nintendo Today early in the year. They drop it the next day. Zelda release date. Holy shit. Kind of big news, like this is how long the Direct will be, that kind of thing. And then really nothing of actual note for months and months and months. And just like, here's a Daisy render that we found in a drawer. Like,
here's a render of the HDMI cable that comes with the Switch 2.
It was just like screenshots from Kirby Fighters 2, and it's like, have a happy fucking Saturday. And you're like, okay. And then Switch 2 launches. No real Nintendo Today major information leading up to Switch 2, which I think is a terrible decision on their end if they want to get people to care about it. Then they go quiet for almost a week, but not exactly a week after the launch of Switch 2. And then they are like, oh, and here's this. And so it's just like, honestly, it's very clear to me that they don't know what they're doing with this fucking app. Also, at some point in the last few weeks, they blocked you from screen recording and screenshotting the fucking Nintendo Today app, which is like, oh my god, they're just like they're laying down the track as they're running on it.
Well, there's also it feels like a somewhat specious claim. It's just from one user so far, but Nintendo or Go Nintendo reported on a bot that automatically re-uploaded Nintendo Today things to Twitter. Apparently, they got a takedown notice for doing that, and the account manager said it's because they were bringing Nintendo Today stuff out of Nintendo Today. The point being, it's just to deepen what you're saying, which is I don't think there's much of a direction for the app, and I don't even really want to speculate about whether we're getting Direct imminently, because I think it's as likely as it is unlikely that like we wake up Monday morning and Nate the Hate says, oh, actually, guys, now I am hearing about a Direct. Who knows? Yeah. I think that the larger trend that I want to keep an eye on as the generation unfolds here is if Nintendo is actually equipped to communicate with the audience effectively and consistently without the Direct format. And now the Direct format's not going away, but Mr. Miyamoto said explicitly in the Switch 1 Direct shortly before Switch 2 came out that the company is looking for ways to move to share information outside of Directs. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that not work super well, not only on Nintendo Today with the examples you cited and I cited, but also something we've been talking about in our smaller group is that Dragon Drive is a confirmed digital-only game, and that was confirmed in an As a Developer column. Mm-hmm. That's the only place it was confirmed, and most people don't know that, because I don't think most people are reading the As a Developer columns.
Yeah, true.
The wider point for me is that I think that we're in this strange period where Nintendo, for whatever reason, is not happy with the status quo of a big February Direct, a big June Direct, and a big September Direct. Yeah. And we're trying to use these other modes of distributing information, and it feels ineffective from both their point of view and the player point of view. So whether there's a Direct or not, I don't really know. I think that there's a case for and against it that's equally strong in the month. Yeah. But it's something I want to keep an eye on really through the first year of the generation. How they go about communication, and if there's going to be a new status quo, or if it's always going to be sort of scattershot how and when we get news.
They have to figure out a system. I think we're just in a weird growing pains transitionary period, which we also sort of felt last year. There was a lot of weird communication happening last year. So I just thought that by the launch of Switch 2, or leading up to it, that we'd have a clear path forward, but we don't.
Well, and that's what's weird, right? Because it feels like you wouldn't upset the apple cart until the replacement is ready. Like Directs, it's not like Directs were a failing format. You know what I mean?
They were only getting more popular.
Yeah, and then
that one where they only announced that Rhythm Heaven is coming out in 2026. That one's like their most viewed Directs. Like, yeah, but like, that's your most viewed Direct. What the heck? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know.
Right, and so I just think it's like, why are we in this predicament at all?
Yeah.
And so
the final thing that I want to say about Splatoon Raiders is that I also think that it's interesting that this is a Switch 2 game, and not cross-platform in any way, or what it kind of feels like to me as like an asset reusing spin-off, which it literally is, would make more sense as a late era Switch 1 game. Like, if it came out last year or something, like if that was one of the late in the year games, or hell, if it was a March game this year, Splatoon spin-off, reusing assets on Switch 1, that would feel right, I guess. I'm happy that it's a Switch 2 game again, because I'm just interested to see if the Switch 2 hardware can be used in some way that Switch 1 wouldn't be, that makes this feel different, because it'll technically be our first Splatoon game designed specifically for Switch 2 hardware. From what limited we saw, again, it almost doesn't really feel like it would need the jump, but maybe there's probably something that are hiding. It's very, very interesting. That it's not on Switch 1 at all.
I think to me, this point actually dovetails really well with our conversation about Nintendo's messaging, because I think that this is an example of how Nintendo's development teams internally are in a strange transitionary period, just as the marketing side of the company is, because I would have to guess that when we get the inevitable asset developer calling about this game, they're going to talk about this starting as a Switch 1 project. I think that
easily. Yes, definitely true.
There's little doubt in my mind. I mean, that happened for Mario Kart, and I would really be shocked if it's not the same for DK Bonanza as well.
Absolutely.
And so I think that...
I think it also may have been true for Duskbloods.
It is true for Duskbloods, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miyazaki confirmed that.
Frankly...
voice.
Kirby Air Riders, I think that's also possible. I think it's only one that's not possible for is Dragon Drive.
Yeah, and I mean, like, by the time Splatoon 3 would have been finished, development on Switch 2 games, starting on Switch 2 and releasing on Switch 2 is obviously a lot more feasible than, like, for instance, Mario Kart World starts its creative pre-production in 2017, right? And obviously Switch 2 is not even a thought really at that point in time. So maybe it's not true, but I just think that we're going to see games that could have been on Switch 1 or look like they could have been on Switch 1, but in reality are illustrative of the opportunities Switch 2 is providing by giving added scope and power to realize games that were running badly or simply weren't feasible on Switch 1. And I think, obviously, that in Mario Kart World is that. They've said that explicitly. And I think that'd be the case for Donkey Kong, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the case for this game as well. So we'll see. I think this is a very fascinating time for Nintendo. I think it's a much less obvious break in generational lines in many ways than I think we would have anticipated. And I'm curious, when we have the benefit of hindsight, or even when we just get to the end of the year, how it shakes out in terms of the games releasing, in terms of the way Nintendo talks about them, if there is clarity, or if it still feels like we've got 1 foot on the Switch 1 raft and 1 foot on Switch 2's. So we'll see.
We will see. Indeed. Abram, thank you for joining me to talk about this.
It's a pleasure. Alex, you said you'd have the appearance fee sent later today, right?
Working on it.